Okay.
Okay, we're live. Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to another live Aquarius Rising Africa show. And I am so pleased to have with us again Adrien John Wells and our lovely, beautiful Jane from Australia. We had Adrian on the show a couple of days ago, who absolutely gave us some jaw droppers. We will continue the interview with him today. And but before doing so, I'm going to hand over to Janie and just sit back and enjoy this one. Not that you can really enjoy much of the information coming through, I don't think, but have our eyes opened somewhat more to what's been going on right in front of us. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Adrian and Janie. And I'm going to hand over to you.
Hello.
Hi. You can hear me all right, can't you? Yeah?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's all good. Yeah.
Cool bananas. I was going to bring some light entertainment into it and do a song, but then I changed my mind at the last minute. Anyhow, I thought I'd bring just a little bit of happiness into it just before we go into the deeper stuff. So everyone needs a bit of a smile to fill themselves up with some, some happiness beforehand. So it's always a good start. I was looking at, as I was talking to Adrian, not that, Adrian and I have just had a few talks, and I was thinking the first one that we did, and I was looking at some of the comments, and I was thinking rather deeply about it, and I was thinking, okay, this is really hard for people to understand if they haven't gone through it themselves. And humans, their nature, unfortunately, is sometimes to take a second guess. Okay, they're allowed to, but take a second guess and go, hey, that doesn't fit in with my narrative. First of all, your narrative is going to be completely different to Adrian's narrative, because fortunately for you, you didn't have to go through this stuff. And to me, this type of stuff resembles the same as being the child that got abused, but you told your mouth is covered and put in the corner and said, no, your truth isn't truth. For example, I am getting somewhere, everyone. The other day, some of my relatives contacted me and said, because of my uncle that abused me, the reason why they still talk to him is because we don't know if what I said is true, because I haven't had it put in a court case. So they have to be like lawyers, because until proven true, virtually in a nice way, I'm still a liar. Wow. Now, I have a big problem with that, because my word is my word, and other people, their words are their words. And so if anyone finds it hard, that's your problem. But we're stepping out, and kind of to a certain degree, our careers that we have and different things is on the line. So people need to be aware of that, and realize that a lot of us aren't doing this just because peace, love and mung beans and we want to have our face, people seen it. It's because it's very important. And part of that, I decided just very briefly to say, first, on a limited scale, people need to understand, even when a child goes through trauma, which isn't even extreme as what Adrian has gone through, it affects 3 areas of the brain. And the 3 areas of the brain affects all areas, but the 3 main areas it affects is I can never say it right, the amygdala, the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, right? So as he's even talking, if those areas aren't damaged, well, they're already damaged, but his are more damaged. He can explain that himself if he wants. You get triggered as you were talking about their events. You get triggered, and sometimes their emotions or the other memories that come up will be triggered whilst you were talking. So many of us, when we're talking to you guys, we're actually reliving experiences, or our body is having body memory, which is putting us into trauma again. So just understand that out of respect, that is also going on. So then the hippocampus, which is the main area, is for learning. That's our learning area. And is very vulnerable to getting damaged. Okay. The prefrontal cortex is our behavior area, right? The amygdala stores our visual images. Now this is important for Adrian's thing. The visual images of trauma and sensory fragments, which means the trauma memory is not stored like a story as we store it, rather by how our 5 senses work. The memories are stored through fragments of visual images, smells, and touch and taste. Okay, so it's very different to how we would tell a story if we went down the street. Okay, and so the way the person's getting it out of their brain is very different. Now, sometimes when Adrian is telling a story, I think Adrian sounds very smart and is very smart, but I think he has a different opinion of himself, but I think he does, and I think the rest of us will agree with that. But because a lot of all the different traumas he has had, he sometimes has, this is his words, has had problems with his pathways. He's got more straight pathways, not the ones that are going off from there. So it makes it hard sometimes to multitask, and even multitask in conversation. So sometimes when he's telling his story, if he has to stop or get in between, he can get this blank and he's trying to figure out where he is, or it's hard because his brain's holding that memory. Then when something else happens, he's trying to get the other part, the joint of that pathway, to answer that question, but he's still trying to keep that memory that he was talking about. So these are just the on a minuscule level of what someone like him is going through, even without talking about what they put inside his brain. And then he's also been in car accidents, and then the trauma from childhood, emotional, physical, sexual. So we've got a whole heap going on here, which manifests physically in the body. So I thought I'd just set that up, so as Adrian's talking, people actually get the picture of what is going on with him, and why sometimes when he talks, it won't be A to Z in the storyline. So I thought that's out of respect for him. Adrian, what do you think about that? I did it on a very simplistic level.
So, you know, obviously the level of brain damage I had as a child was permanent brain damage. As I mentioned earlier, just talking to Chantel about one of the culprits, which was Mark Martin Holzberger, who became warrant officer of the Royal Australian Navy. Overall, he just didn't like me as a child. He believed that they were taking the overall, what was called capital. Now, capital is the military-industrial complex for Australia. So that's regards to cyber defence in this nation, in Australia. So because I was in the military ranks as a child, they just wanted rid of me. So he threw me in front of a car. I'd already had one accident just previous. As I said, I was left in my own home with my mother missing for probably up to 6 months. And this was on and off. This wasn't just a constant missing period for 2 years. They were that arrogant and that confident with their technology that they were using that they knew they could take my mother away and bring her back in a battered condition and even under mind control. So we're talking very dangerous people here. You're talking, as I said, in the US, it wasn't just the Ronald Reagan administration, it was the Central Intelligence Agency in Hollywood. So these are people with their spy masters. Spies, people don't even know what a spy really is. You know, a spy is an infiltrator. It's like a host, an alien host that infiltrates another being under mind control and cleans you out from the inside, like a parasite, but an intelligent parasite. If you really understand what a spy does, the spy infiltrates their host. And their host, they gather intelligence and steal information. So, was there a need for that to happen to me as a child? Obviously not. This was basically using every access to every part of the government channels they could to find a way to abuse anything that they could and get away with lawlessness. This was lawlessness at a level of fascism. Now, I'd have to say a blend of fascism and communism in Australia. It was those two sort of libraries, I guess you could say, held within the NSA and CIA on known world history, known military involvement in other parts of the world, and how Australia could access the National Security Agency and utilise that information to start what's known as a political regime. So, Mark Martin Holzberger just wanted to be dead as a kid, and he did pick me up off my BMX, threw me straight onto Lower Dandenong Road in front of about at least 20 people, and in front of Moorabbin Airport, straight into an oncoming vehicle. Car hit me at 60 kilometres per hour. 60 kilometres per hour, straight in the head, in the skull, and then my body got wound up and all mangled underneath a steel car back then. It's 1984. The cars weren't made of plastic back then, made of solid steel chrome bull bars. And it just mangled my chest. And then he came out and shot me with a rifle in front of other people. I'm not joking. I don't make up stories here. This is what he did out of the Vietnam veterans' home that I told you about last time. James Raymond Burke wasn't home when this happened. James Raymond Burke, as I said, service personnel number 18,252. He was at his army base. Mark Martin Holzberger, I believe, is the son of the now politician that you will know that's just come back to run the Nationals, called Barnaby Joyce. He's a paedophile, another sex addict. He was kicked out of Parliament recently, but, they didn't care how they tortured me, is what I'm saying. I come from the unions. I came from that industrial complex settling in Australia. This was a branch of a cyber department from the Pentagon. So basically, you've got to look at it as if you're taking a slice of a cake of the Pentagon and you're relocating the whole department in Australia for them to use whenever they please and at whatever lawlessness they feel like using it. So, you understand what the Pentagon is and the type of different departments they have. So, Australia got a cyber department, what's called cyber, in the 1980s. So, cyber is about profile. It's like FBI agent. Like an FBI agent will profile someone, what you look like, how you position yourself. Now, CIA do the same thing. How you dress, how you stand. Or sort of replicating other people. But this was much more advanced in the case of they found complete replicants of American information. So say, for instance, in that CIA department from the US, they had a Hollywood celebrity. They would search around Australia looking for a replicant, going through facial data systems, even licensed systems, using other Australian departments within Five Eyes spy agency to say, well, we'll profile that Australian, we'll bribe them to join with us because we need to fulfill time. Cyber is like a bank, okay? It's a banking system. You need to fulfill time. If you don't get time, you don't get money. Otherwise, your bank closes down. This is what I was in as a child. It's money, basically. It was the big money, but black money. Scams like the German government have been running, they've basically been brought undone for like that cum-ex tax scandal, where they've been stealing taxpayers' money, somewhere around the figure of possibly over $100 billion of German taxpayers' money has been stolen. These are the things I'm from as a child. These were CIA cyber portfolios, cyber programs. So you can understand why they wanted to damage my brain as a child back in Australia after being overseas. Of course they want to damage my brain or kill me. Just because it's money. It's money. And anyone that's in this system had already, once you go into that system, you already gathered an attitude. You've already gathered, I'm a fascist. I'm a communist. As soon as you enter that cyber system, it turns you into another person. Because you're told you need to outsmart people. And the spy agency says, look, this is what this person thinks about you. So you're always playing ahead of the game. So you start to turn into this fascism. It really is that what Nazi Germany was like, to be ahead of the game. So in regards to the brain damage they did to me, some of it was technical as they sort of were trying to work out how to biohack my brain and enter the agency. Other people like Mark Martin Holzberger, who I believe is the nephew or son of Barnaby Joyce. He's come back in now as the head of the Nationals Party in the Australian federal government, and they're called the Liberals and Nationals Coalition. So they're the people that did all this to me as a child. So as far as I knew as a child, Barnaby Joyce was either his uncle or father. He's the one that threw me in front of the car. I ended up with brain damage. I ended up with heart treatment implants in my skull. So they had to go in through the ear as a child, in the ear canal, actually in the ear canal, underneath and down, sort of around the jaw. That was done under local anaesthetic by a local doctor when I was a child. So I'm pretty sure they were called TMR, early TMR treatment. They're used for heart, for people who have like a heart condition. The magnets were remote controlled back in the 1980s, and they were used for controlling heart rhythms. So if someone's had, I guess, maybe heart swelling, or maybe there is some technical names for that condition. Anyway, I had those implants modified after I was hit by a car to do TMS, basic TMS. So this was already corruption, is what I'm saying, because transcranial magnetic stimulation doesn't need to be done with implants. The doctor can just hold a handheld magnetic device down on the person's head and do magnetic waves. Because I had a cracked skull from being hit by the car, my whole skull was cracked open, or nearly all the way around. It was just like almost floating, and the brain was, obviously the brain had been swollen. So I had the sound of, not tinnitus, but it's the sound of a ringing brain, a brain damage. It's a horrible sound. Some people have talked about it getting concussion, or sports, like rugby players have talked about it. When you get a serious head injury, you get that intense ringing in the brain. So I had to have those medical implants redesigned, re-engineered, and miniaturized as small as possible, so that could go down through the ear canal and into the skull. And I've got two magnets one side and one magnet the other, and they're remote control. And that's designed for magnetic stimulation. It worked as a child. It did bring down the swelling. It did stop the ringing inside my brain. So exactly as the doctor planned. But was it an accident? No, it was planned. You see, so none of these things that ever happened to me as a child were never, Adrian fell off his BMX. My mother's been held hostage by bikies somewhere across the road, working for the Australian Army. Now, that bikie, you will know him now as an actor. He's over in England pretending to be English, like Tom Hiddleston, who plays Loki and Thor with Chris Hemsworth. His name is Sean Bean. Sean Bean, you've probably heard of him.
Way. Come on, Sean Bean. He's so cool.
He is the head, original head in the 1980s of the Satan's Sinner motorcycle club in Australia. They're a biker gang, but they were very close to the Australian Army, very close. He lived in the next street. Their motorcycle club was in the next street. It's called De Havilland Road, I think it was called. It's an industrial area across from Moorabbin Airport. And you will see another one of their motorcycle club members with Tom Hiddleston's dad in the Game of Thrones. Tom Hiddleston's dad also moved over to England in 1993. So this is how long these people had me for. You can already see 1983, 1993. There's 10 years. 10 years on top of me. These people were cunning. Did my mum ever know what was going on? No, because it's cyber intelligence. These criminals were smart. And my mum knew she'd been bashed, obviously, or been hit by someone. She knew she'd been attacked. Didn't understand the military workings going on inside their brain. These people were smart criminals, really smart criminals. So did I understand what they're doing? Yeah, because I'm a child in defence. I was a child in defence. So they weren't outsmarting me, you see. Like anything I didn't have to have ears to hear. I had military brains that you can hear also. It's an extra set of ears. So anything they said or think in their network, I could hear as a child, everything, absolutely everything. Their real names, their addresses, wherever they lived. Or I was taken to their homes. So Tom Hiddleston's dad, as I said, he stars in The Lord of the Rings, and they sort of copied my family coat of arms from a document folder I had at home, which is just the lion, and it's in the Reigns of Castamere, it's called, where Tom Hiddleston's dad stars. It's about probably, I've put it up on Facebook. I didn't recognise Tom Hiddleston's dad straight away when I looked and watched the Game of Thrones, because going through a lot of people, but understand how I was I know a lot of actors from my childhood. I know these people were going, as I said in my previous live recording, in regards to up to 1,000 people. And I did specified why it was a certain amount of people. I didn't really specify exactly why, is I believe in some of the departments in Five Eyes Spy Agency, the FBI, and what's called the National Security Agency, in their cyber departments, they have a specified amount of employees. So they might have 250 people at this FBI department for cyber. NSA for cyber, they've got 250 people. CIA, 250 people. Department of Homeland Security, 250 people. So that makes up 1,000 people, you see. So they mirror imaged, is what I'm saying, what I just started in this live reporting, how even in these cyber crime networks, or what's known as cyber intelligence, you can profile yourself into banking time. You need a bank, obviously, to do this. You just can't just do it in defense if you're going to be a civilian criminal. You need a corrupt bank. If you're in South Africa, you need a bank there, because banks have corporate networks, what's known as a corporate hub. That corporate hub, you can attach a spy agency, you can attach all sorts of corporate industry, you can attach corporate farming, you can attach a diamond mine from a corporate industry to the bank, and you're allowed to use a cyber intelligence platform. Do banks tell ordinary civilians that? No, you've got to be a corporate really to know about that. You know, this particular technology, this particular cyber intelligence. As I'm saying, cyber intelligence, you really no longer need the use of an electronic device. You're just talking straight through the broadcast of security intelligence signals. So it's a form of satellite technology where you're sending visual signals to the human brain at the same level as we're making a live recording right now. So, this is all I sort of experienced as a child, and that's what they're all in. That's why they're celebrities. So anyway, Sean Bean, Lord of the Rings. Now, as I was going through my brain, I've been racking my brain to remember his name, and I'm sure when he was in my house when I was a kid, he was in there wearing his leather jacket. Edgar Williamson, I'm pretty sure is his name. Edgar, E-D-G-A-R, Edgar Williamson. And they were the Satan Sinner motorcycle club in Mordialloc. Recently, someone got murdered there just about 3 years ago in the same industrial area. The man that was murdered left a known portfolio of his information in the industrial shed that Victoria Police sort of said that they arrived on his information. That this man that was murdered was from a secret special police unit. Now, Victoria Police said they know nothing about it, of any secret special police unit. But there is. It's all these dirty Australians who are celebrities. So you got to understand, when they merged that into a civilian community in another country, you've got to find an authority, like I said, a bank. And if a bank can't supply full authority, well, then they might find the next avenue. They might find corrupt police, or Australian Federal Police in this case, or in Spain, it could be the Seville. You're finding an avenue of police where they deal also with intelligence, because police departments do deal with intelligence or have special units. So these police, though, are sending bikies that are wanted for murder, gun trafficking, drug trafficking, child exploitation, rape of children, like Sean Bean, under new identities as Sean Bean, to England. What I'm saying here is Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, who plays the part Loki, and I grew up with him, as I said. Tom Hiddleston, I was at his house usually every weekend in 1992. I was never allowed to come through the front door. I'd always have to come down his side gate, and he'd let me come through his bedroom window. That's how I'd always have to enter his room. And he was a bonghead even back then. He used to sit around making bongs and smoking marijuana. So talking about Hollywood, he said they're waiting to call. We don't know when we're going to call. We're going to America, and then my dad's moving to England. So his dad is, all these years later, an actor in England in the Game of Thrones. As I said, The Reigns of Castamere is series 3 of the Game of Thrones, episode 9. And I did a video on the bikie is the Satan Sinner. Another member of the same motorcycle club with Sean Bean, and he's still got a beard, exactly the same. He had the beard even when I was a kid. He still looked the same. He was the youngest member they had. He was underage. He was under 18. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and he was the youngest motorcycle club member they had. So he was probably about 16 years old. And he already had a beard then. So he was already hairy then. It's the same guy. No, it's them. So in that clipping there, that's Tom Hiddleston's dad. Tom Hiddleston's dad's got a bald head, and he's sort of, you can see him, he's got, completely shaven bald in the Game of Thrones, and he's got like the tipped ears. That's one thing I remembered about him. That's one thing when I focused on that image closer, I was like, that's who it is. That's Tom Hiddleston's dad. Because I didn't see him too much around Aspendale. Even though I used to go to Tom Hiddleston's house, as I said, he used to tell me, my dad's a spy, you can't even use my toilet here. When I go to his house in Aspendale in 1992, he said, you can't even go to my toilet. You need to go to the toilet, go at the back. So because my dad works for ASIO, he's a spy. So, there was no lies about their involvement when I was growing up. So that's Sean Bean, and then there's Sean Foster, and then there's quite a lot of Seans. So you start seeing when they're using a cyber intelligence platform like this, you end up with people with a lot of names, the same name. And they're all profiling themselves into a banking institution. So what ended up happening, I believe, when I was a child, too many names arrived in code, in a sequence of code, and they segregated people in certain areas. So you'll go to England, you'll go to San Diego, you'll be living in Hollywood, you'll be living over here in New York. So a lot of people I met, were strategically placed in their futures, what would be seen as like a cyber future. The size of this was unbelievable. And Australia couldn't have done it, is what I'm saying. Australia wasn't that clever that they could institutionalize something like this. This was an American beast system, is all I can say. Is a beast, an absolute beast system. They knew how to child sex traffic. They knew how to exploit children. They just, it was natural to the Americans. To the Australians, they still had to arrive on what to do. Not straight away, is what I'm saying. A lot of Australians didn't understand exactly when they first met me. The army brought them in secretly to security and intelligence, which is known as ASIO in Australia. Doesn't mean you become enlisted, but they can talk to you from a corporate security intelligence platform, communicate direct to your brain through telepathy, through a signals communication. And they'll say, we're security. Can you hear us? They'll be back at a military headquarters somewhere, maybe on a Navy base, Army or Air Force. They'll say, can you hear us? This is Edgar Williamson, can you hear us? Receive the command. And the army would be next door there to me, and they'd say, talk back, think, tell him to think back. So, they were all being trained in that, hanging around my house as a child. In the movie business, though, there's 4 of them, 4 Satan sinners. They closed their motorcycle club down, and they're attached to the Hells Angels in New Zealand. And the Hells Angels are part of Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe is from New Zealand. Russell Crowe came through. This is why he says he's Australian. Russell Crowe came through me as a child, being in the operation, you see. This was still American. It was still American. It was still an American-based authority, which meant it was the Five Eyes countries, United Kingdom, Canada, United States of America, New Zealand, and Australia. They are the only people that got to become celebrities. I could only come from the Five Eyes countries. So if you were from South Africa, they would say to you in the 1980s, relocate yourself to Canada, move to Vancouver. We'll contact you in 10 years' time at this date on that time through our security intelligence network, and we'll invite you into our VIP organisation. From there, you would become a celebrity, basically, and adopted into movies. So for people that were outside the Five Eyes countries, as I said, that was the program. They said, and a lot of South Africans, you'll find they'll be in Five Eyes countries. So either my cousin's family here in Australia, they're all married to South Africans, people from South Africa. Why are they close to my cousin's family? When I was taken for child sex trafficking and exploitation with billionaires who run diamond mines in South Africa as a child. So, every step, everywhere I was taken around the world in this Monarch program, it was always another level of mining, of diamond mines, something for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, something for the Danish royal family. It was always another level of corporation, another level of cyber intelligence, another level of banking wealth, and how Australia could have access, really they shouldn't have had, for insider trading to the US systems and stockpile all that information in Australia for themselves. So Australia was sort of producing themselves. And look at the types of people they brought in, all walks of life, motorcycle club members, Hell's Angels, Satan's sinners, the mongrel mob. You know, they brought in people from New Zealand who were Maoris and other motorcycle gangs like Highway 61, I think they were called. They were always around me as a child in Australia, close to me. So anyone that was close to me was doing up here. They were doing secret dealings. So I always had like the Highway 61 motorcycle club around me, and Mongrel Mob, they're called, from New Zealand. They're another motorcycle club, which I believe that Tamira Derek Morrison, he's a New Zealand actor. He's of Maori. He's born in 22nd December 1960. He's age 60 now. Rotorua, New Zealand. Now, he plays the part Jango Fett in Star Wars as clone of the clone troopers. This was part of the cyber intelligence when I was a child. This is a little bit difficult, but we're all sitting at home right now, okay? So you could imagine being invited to someone's house on the black market, let's say. My home was used as the black market by the Australian Army. And they say, Chantel, you come over to this family's home. We're holding the parents hostage. We're going to extort the parents for what they're worth because it's a political regime. Now, I've explained why that happened. My dad was basically the owner of a bank before he was murdered. His union had their own bank here in Australia. It was called the Waterside Workers Credit Union. So that's also why I was taken as ransomed. As I said, I was ransomed as a child because my dad was dead. They had no other way to try and sabotage the union. And what's the first method if you want to sabotage a union or any other corporation? You need to sabotage their finances. So, this is how it was done. And Ronald Reagan himself was involved with this, with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, 1983, 1984, back in Australia. And as I said, some years in cyber, you can't really lock it down, Even though, say, I might have been taken the year before, in 1982, it's not how cyber works. If you're on a cyber intelligence platform, they say, we've got an operational time. So that operational time when I go missing might be 12 months, 14 months of operational time. Within that time frame, I might be moved for a certain layer, a certain corruption of people, where they might choose, say, from Melbourne City up to Sydney in Australia, travelling along the Hume Highway, interconnecting a massive web of crime along that highway for financial fraud. So they need time to do that. As I'm saying, this is banking on a cyber crime level where you need time. You just can't do this overnight. You've got to go out and do the footwork. You've got to go out and network people. So even though you can gain cyber intelligence for free, which is the visual information, which is visual data, which is probably far more advanced than anything Julian Assange. But still, as I said, Julian Assange, I don't believe he's in at the level that I was as a child. He would know too well what happened to me as a kid because it was so far spread around Australia. But and New Zealand, obviously, too, is where I'm talking about here. So Jango Fett, he's playing that part in Clone Wars. That cyber intelligence was already sold for Star Wars at my home by the Army when I was a child. So the Army had access to give clearance to people. And as I'm saying, you could come over to my house as a black market home and just sit there like you're casually sitting on a couch now and sit around watching movies all day. Are you watching a television? You don't even need a television. There's no television in my home. You're sitting around in like an intelligence center, sitting around watching Cyber Futures. Cyber Futures is a stream of Hollywood, Hollywood portfolios, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Harrison Ford, movies like Blade Runner 2047. That was done, it is 2047, I'm pretty sure. That was done next door. In that movie, that was filmed from Mordialloc, next door to my house. It's based on Lieutenant. If you watch the movie, he's going through the future, in the cyber future, and he's into rank, lieutenant, in the police cyber future building, So the movie's about cyber futures, Blade Runner, with Harrison Ford. But the postcard he's got in the movie for 2047 is where the army were next door to me. That is the tree in that house, the actual tree. That's the tree in that movie is on a postcard. It's on that movie in Blade Runner 2047. And you'll just see down the bottom on the postcard, it's got a timeline. And he's just got all these military digits on the bottom of the postcard. And the postcard is like a living postcard, but it's just got a constant rhythm of algorithms and time going along the bottom of the tree. And the tree is an exact photo of the tree next door to me. And that's where it was done. My house was used for a Hollywood crime, like Hollywood insider trading, but not at a level of celebrities. So it's not just at a level of, say, Harrison Ford or Arnold Schwarzenegger. This was a level of being a CIA agent in Hollywood and having access to a cyber intelligence platform. That cyber intelligence platform, you could have access to any future movies up to 30, 40 years in the future. So in 1984, people came to my house. They were given, basically seen as like insider trading, but it was given future animation movies or different movies of the future. They were able to sit there and watch them. And so was I. Half these movies, when I go and watch a Hollywood movie, it's like, well, I've seen it before. I haven't seen it at the movies. I've seen it at home, sitting in my house, a hostage as a child, in the military cyber center, while they broadcast signals and transmissions of intelligence. So there's hundreds of people that experience that come into my home. Where do most of them become? Politicians or celebrities. So this is some sort of black market shadow world in regards to who they are. As I said, a lady turned up at my house when I was a child. She's now the Prime Minister of New Zealand. So that's Jacinda Kate LaRue Ardern. Kate was my mother's work name when my mother worked at brothels, because my mum used to own brothels illegally before police took them over. So that's also why my mother was such a target of the authorities in the state of Victoria, is my mum basically owned the whole sex industry for the state of Victoria. She was like she was young, but she was working in businesses of maintaining her own brothels for sex work. But brothels did become legalised in Victoria. Now, who took over the whole industry? Police. They got rid of people like my mum, and corrupt police took over the whole sex industry in the eastern seaboard of Australia, because now the state of Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria is legalised prostitution. It's not illegal. You're allowed to go to brothels. So that was also another reason for targeting against my mother the way she did. It was just remove her. We'll take over the whole sex industry. But what were most of these men involved in? As I'm saying, it's pedophilia. So it wasn't really these police coming into the sex industry to provide a working service where prostitutes or classy women that can work in, the escort trade, it could, provide a service as a prostitute, with a reasonable mannerism. It became a regimented police operation for police to infiltrate the prostitution businesses. And all brothels in Victoria are owned by ex-police officers. There's not a brothel you can go to in Victoria that is not owned by an ex-police officer. So this mother, because she was seen, my mum like police. She wasn't part of their boys' club. She wasn't part of their system. She was from an opposition government. She had a different outlook on life that wouldn't suit them once police were coming into the game anyway. So a lot of this was still who owns the sex industry globally. It was another reason I was targeted as a child. Who owns the sex industry globally? And these men that were taking over were, they're all pedophiles, all of them. They're all pedophiles, a whole lot of them. They were taking over the sex industry globally for a bad cause. They were touching children. They were into they were into rotten government snuff. So Jacinda Kate, she uses my mother's work name because that was my mother's work name at any brothel. She was always known as Kate, not Anne. So I know this Jacinda Ardern, the now Prime Minister of New Zealand. Now, she works for a liberal government extremist organisation because that's what they are. This is what I've explained to you. These people are infiltrators in my governments that would have been close to my father. So part of the unions were close to the Australian Labor Party. The unions were always strong because that's what the Labor Party is. It's a government, Labor, working Labor class people, Labor people. So they were infiltrating that since the 1980s. So it doesn't matter if it's Australian Labor Party or the Labor Party in New Zealand or the Labor Party in England, Canada or the United States of America. In regards to that sort of industry, there are Five Eyes conglomerate now of infiltration. So it was infiltration and what's known as government espionage, this is bad level types of crime. To bribe people into this crime, as I said, they were offered cyber intelligence, which is Hollywood insider trading. So, I mean, I don't know if Harrison Ford knew this was going on. I don't know if Arnold Schwarzenegger knew this was going on in Australia. But you could come to my house as a child and people would be given intelligence on Arnold Schwarzenegger's future movies for 25 years into the future. Names of the movies and even previews of the movie as you would see it previewed on television in the future. You could see it there and then through a cyber intelligence. So I'm not too sure.
Sorry, just to interrupt you there. What would that cyber intelligence system be called then? I mean, if this was what we've just been talking about,
in the Central Intelligence Agency in the CIA, that is an employment position. You can work in cyber intelligence or you can work in cyber security. It is a specialised field, but it is an officer's employment. So you're still employed as a CIA officer, but they give you a intelligence enhancement to your natural brain, basically. You're given a synthetic visual capacity to a synthetic simulation system. So it's Hollywood movies, Hollywood editing system. You can imagine the powerhouse of their quality of imaging, but it's in cyber intelligence. It's in another platform, which is only designed for the human brain, a way to access the human brain through spy systems, what would be employed as a spy. Now, obviously, if you're employed in the CIA, you could be a motor mechanic in the CIA. You could be anything, like they've got a lot of positions. So, this was still, as I said as a child, this was still Hollywood, but it was the CIA avenue of what was happening in Australia, of Hollywood. These were CIA agents in Hollywood who were allowing a level of access to Australian citizens that they shouldn't have been allowed to have. It's a level of clearance that obviously most people wouldn't experience unless you're in defence. Anyone in American defence, Department of Defence especially, know what I'm talking about in regards to visual cyber. So it's you're transmitting a signal, you're transmitting a visual signal to someone's brain. You're transmitting a visual signal to someone's brain. So like we talk about, a lot of people talk about voice to skull or directed energy weapons. A lot of people talk about all these other forms of electronic torture technologies these days, or other avenues of these technologies, or the Havana syndrome or other things that have happened to people's brains. They are torture. They're different. It's an electronic assault or electronic warfare. This technology doesn't hurt you, is what I'm saying, because you're not meant to join the CIA to get hurt by that platform that you'll be working in. So, it's still a government technology. and the signal is so much, I don't think, electronic. It's more, it's sent like a sonic wave and can be broadcasted and localized like a local area network. So as we know these days in the internet's used as a local area network. It's still the internet in a sense. Cyber intelligence is still the internet. It's still the World Wide Web. It's still what makes white light. It's still what sends data. It's still what sends code or encryption. But you're receiving it not through a smart device. You're receiving it not through a television. You're receiving it direct to your enhancement to the natural neural functions of the brain. Now, that's always modified somewhere around the skull or just above the skull. They offer you a synthetic web. So it's a synthetic technology which is artificially grown in the human brain, and it is done remotely, believe it or not. They don't need to hold anything down on your head. The army, I used to see as a child, they could enlist people all day to a basic civilian service. So it's a way of using chemicals in the human brain that they already know about. And obviously, through sonic waves or certain technologies that the Australian Army can understand how to condense certain atoms, I guess. Atoms underneath the flesh and part of the skull, where the human brain stores different crystallized chemicals that we absorb in our daily life. Even I believe these days we're born with these chemicals, whether you like it or not. Like DTT is spread, or anything else that has been spreading since World War I across the earth. But then some of these technologies are known even in the days of Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus Christ is the perfect example of cyber intelligence. I don't want to go talking along that path because people start, it's deterring exactly off topic, but it is on topic, if you see what I'm saying. Cyber intelligence is Jesus Christ. It is the Holy Bible. Cyber intelligence in the CIA is all these things, down to a T, down to Jesus Christ, down to his holy hands, down to his white light. Okay, that is cyber intelligence. It's exactly the same as the Holy Bible or as the Quran. You're talking about something of enhancement. And Jesus Christ was exactly about that. So, he was not only finding followers for his way or his savior, but his people were all given the gift of peace. Peace to me, peace be with you. Or Jesus Christ, peace be with you. You're offering someone in the same sense of the CIA. If you're in the CIA, you're offering them peace, cyber intelligence. You're offering them a command, like a military command, brain to brain. Peace be with you. It's in the service. May you survive. May you complete your mission. It's the same platform. I'm not too sure if you're with me, but
I'm following you.
The churches were involved all along. There's no doubt about this. I was taken to the Vatican too by David Hurley, the now Governor General of Australia. So I did meet Pope John Paul II as a child. But they're a religious organisation. They were still part of the Monarch Program that I was in as a child. And that Monarch Program was during the Falklands War, which is known as the Falklands Islands. So Prince Andrew was sailing out a ship at that time. So this been taken out of Australia in 1983. Obviously, it started in 1982, which is the original timeline. But as I said, in cyber intelligence, you can't lock a day down. You can't say it's this day because they offered a mission timeline. In this mission, you've got 14 months to have that child there to 1,000 locations and bring the child back to Australia. So Hurley went a little bit deeper, though. I mean, way out in the sense of the people he mixed with. When I was taken overseas through the Special Air Service Regiment from Sydney to the United States of America, they blended with all types of people, from normal American civilians to certain families that the FBI could say this would be a suitable religious intelligence platform. That family would be a good place to hide information for your intelligence platform. They knew where to source and where to guide people. And I believe that man involved in that, his name was Frank Doyle Jr. So, as I'm saying, I can sort of spread out with information, but it's all, as you can see, it's in a platform. And that's why I use the word platform. Because if you start talking about this person and that happened and I was taken here and there, it's not done like that. It's a platform. Everyone's on the same platform. Or another way to describe it, if we want to talk Jesus Christ, heaven. We've all gone to heaven. We're all in heaven together. All in the same place.
Yeah.
But we're all in a different place in heaven, though, in the cyber intelligence platform. So it is a platform in that sense, you see, because it's open to time. It's open to time. It's limitless,
Wow.
like going to heaven. Yeah, you got to,
Wow.
these agencies I was in as a child, you're living the future. I was in departments of MI6 with the Australian Army. We were viewing the end of the world in 2060 on media. So MI6 and Five Eyes especially, why Five Eyes was formed, is they're a electronic media monitoring body, also known as cyber, but an electronic cyber department. So they deal in algorithms and encoded encryption in spying through time. But they're designed around the 5 countries, though, for security, you see. So that's why they've specifically chosen those 5 locations around the world, the United Kingdom, Canada, United States of America, New Zealand and Australia, in regard to intercepting China or Afghanistan or Iraq, or intercepting signals from the Cold War at that time from Canada. So those countries are chosen to intercept signals and intercept electronic code or encryption. So those were the days before the World Wide Web. But in a sense, it was the World Wide Web, but it was a military version of that platform.
Yeah.
Oh, it was sort of blended, as I'm saying. You're in a platform with access to multiple departments. Or integrated is another way military forces will talk about it. You're integrated. You've been integrated, have you? So if you're integrated, that means you could be in the United States Marine Corps, but you're working for another 50 departments all around the world and all different operations and small missions. You've been integrated into different services. So when I was in some of those services as a child, they specialise in media. They specialise in probably the agency that works with those systems, I believe, in the United States of America is the National Security Agency. I believe it is the NSA, who deal with these highly advanced encryption and spying through time. So in the 1980s, most Australian citizens had already seen 9/11. The 9/11 terror attacks, we had already seen that. Should I be sharing information like that? I could probably get shot dead if I was in America. So if I was seen as an agent still in the CIA, you see, because you're not meant to talk about it, because you can talk about it verbally, but what I'm saying, if I was still an agent in the military defense, I would be talking and I would be in the platform at the same time. So that's sort of ringing alarm bells. I'm not in defense anymore because I've done so much damage to my brain. So now I'm just like an ordinary civilian, which is great. I'm allowed to talk. I'm not a whistleblower because they can't prove that I was in defense. Well, they probably could, but even then, they still can't prove much. But as I said, we had most of the media as a child that I've seen in these agencies. We had Frank Doyle was involved in that agency for the Australian Army while I was overseas, Frank Doyle Jr. And that was the 9/11 terror attacks, plus the bombing in 1994, I think it was. They bombed the North Tower in New York. That was the major data that they moved on. So that's how the President of the United States of America, Ronald Reagan, gave authority and said, this agency is real from Australia. This agency is integrated. This agency is in Pine Gap, is where it was from, in Central Australia. They work in intercepting advanced signals, but they're not allowed to communicate terrorist threats back out to the world. So even if 9/11 was going to happen, they're not allowed to intervene. They can spy through time, they can intercept code, they can create encryption or terror threats or threat analysis, is what it's called, cyber threat analysis or cyber intelligence with threat analysis. So these systems, that was what I was in as a child, threat analysis, which is a real professional field in the CIA, and they analysed threats around the world using integrated systems, as I'm saying. Some might be early internet, like DARPA, that was being used from Pentagon. And then you might have real military systems, which are like the internet, but it's atmospheric, which I believe was called an exonet or something when I was a child. I heard some strange names, a lot of things when they were talking when I was a child in the Royal Australian Air Force. It's a type of internet that's broadcasted atmospheric. So it's an atmospheric internet. Instead of needing a copper line or internet through the World Wide Web, it's like an exonet. It's an atmospheric internet. I do believe NASA were also experimenting with that form of internet. Other mockery forms of it today is Apple. Apple call it iCloud, storing information in the iCloud. So, these systems, as I'm saying, they still exist, and weather control is done all the time these days. And those are some of the systems that I was from. But the data I reached as a child and with other people were able to see was up to the year 2060. Up to the year 2060 is as far as I've seen. And by then, people were dying all around the world. It was the end of the world due to pollution, believe it or not. So these systems, as I said, were NASA, NSA, CIA, and Hollywood, advanced bodies. And Tom Cruise makes movies about these, and I'm not joking. Tom Cruise is not a fake, is what I'm saying. Tom Cruise is making movies about real agencies that I was in as a child. They exist. They spy through time. They spy through algorithms, but they're not allowed to interfere. So Eden Pine Gap in Australia, they knew that terror attacks were going to happen at the 9/11 towers. They're not allowed to interfere. They were like a receiving agency. They can share information to military staff or other people. So what the Australian Army, I think, still did with me as a child was pretty wrong, because they got me involved in secret agencies. Why would they do that? Just to attack unions? You can see overall they were building Jeff Bezos, whatever, and people like, well, definitely Sir Richard Branson, Virgin. He isn't who he is. He came out of the space agency. He came out of the department where I was as a child. This was a Monarch program. Yeah. So any of the people that were in this secret department got into NASA, and it was also a backdoor into unknown departments of NASA's space agency. Secretly, the NRO were operating when I was a child because it was the Cold War, and they're called the National Reconnaissance Office. And they got access to satellite, exactly what I'm talking about, transmitting signals intelligence to the human brain. But that's real military command. The NRO is not in Australia, like I was saying. When I was brought home, people are seeing insider trading of more a CIA fashion expo of we're fame. When you stand there as a famous person in Hollywood, when you're getting your photo taken, you're in cyber intelligence. You're in something of the future, is what I'm saying. You're not a celebrity for no other reason. And only celebrities know that. I know that because I've seen everything. So a lot of other Australians that I grew up with didn't see much at all. I believe that's why they've, over the years, put so much implants in my head in Australia, is because they're trying to steal my personal data and memories that they can access and take that Spears and Iggy Azalea from Australia. Stars on Australian TV. He's a paedophile also, and he's from the same suburb in Aspendale where I grew up. And he was friends with Tom Hiddleston and his dad that lived in Aspendale. So they're all liars. Everett Compton works for the Westpac Bank, and he advertises himself on the National Press Club TV show as a man of longevity for the Westpac Bank. The Westpac Bank has recently been exposed for one of the biggest paedophile funding operations in the world. 25 million money laundering transactions were found. They were funding terrorism. This is a bank, Westpac Bank in Australia, were fined. They were fined overall $1.3 billion in fines for the crimes they've committed. This is the Britney Spears connection. This is Britney Spears' father, And this is Iggy Azalea, known as Jessica Fancy, that I grew up with. She's a liar. She says she's 13 years younger than her true age, but you get that when you join the spy agency, you see. If I went to Hollywood now and they picked me up and they said, that's Adrien Wells, but Adrien Wells is not really a celebrity. He's more of a CIA agent of Hollywood in a sense of where I come from, because I was from real departments. I wasn't just an Australian that bumped into this show, you know, as most of the other Australians I'm explaining to them. Motorcycle gangs, Hells Angels, they're all living in England in these films. Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Into the Badlands. And it goes on with all these mini TV series of how many Australians are there. They all pretend to be English long term. If you look them up on Wikipedia, current day Wikipedia, they all say they're English. They're not. They're Australian. So anyway, the most important visual that I did see through this department as a child was the end of the world. And it is around 2060. And it is real media. So exactly as the Tom Cruise movie shows, I'm not too sure if any of you can remember that exact movie where it shows him sitting in the chair where he puts the headgear on and goes through the encryption of time to spy into a future algorithm in the world in 20 years in the future and changes the future.
But can I just ask you, isn't that something that they can manipulate themselves? You know, these algorithms and things that are created, like let's say for the future, and I think this would be the Star Wars program, right? If I'm not mistaken, where they do that. So would that not be their own creations or their own manipulations in the way that they are trying to manipulate events for the future to suit them?
Yes and no. As I said, Pine Gap is an interception agency. So they're an agency that receive, but also spy into other parts of Asia and the Middle East looking for threats. And they've also got other facilities, like in Darwin, called Shoal Bay, another satellite center. So they've got huge satellites. I've been there, just in a tow truck doing deliveries. But they've got British, Americans, and Australians working there. Now, I think the Hawk's Nest is possibly called, or one of the Eagle's Nest on the coast of Western Australia. So they operate directly in different integrated systems, as I'm explaining. They're integrated. You know, they're working at all different avenues because they're working through time. They're spying through time. They have to be integrated. They have to be integrated. They might say, look, you've got the year 2025. You go to the next agency, the British are managing the year 2026. Intercept China, see what the CCP are doing. Intercept their internet communications and military communications, or sonar and radar. See what they can detect through radio and stuff like that. So they've got all years and they are operating all the time in the future. The information is meant to be stockpiled and then assessed as threat analysis. It's not meant to be released back to the civilian population and say, you can go over and be a Hollywood celebrity. You're Iggy Azalea hanging out with Britney Spears. This is what they're using it for. This is a problem. They're giving them a snippet of time, just a small snippet of time, and saying, that's a little bit of a leak. The agency themselves know, well, that's not much. We're not really giving them much at all, but we'll just give them that little bit, and then we'll send them over and they can hang out with real Americans. So, you know, as I'm saying, people like Tom Cruise, though, he is an insider. He is one of the real men behind the game that I'm in from a childhood. He is what he is. He is really involved in this, is what I'm saying, at a level of spying on the future. His movies aren't rubbish. They are modifying the reality of how the technology is used. As I'm saying, you don't need a headset. You don't need a headset for starters, because you'd use the National Reconnaissance Office, or you'd use NASA, and they transmit the signals intelligence to your brain. So they do it by a satellite. So you don't need to sit in a chair putting a headset on to spy on the future. But he does make a good point, talking about a particular system that I'm talking about, like Five Eyes, where Five Eyes is dedicated to spy on the processes of time. And what I mean by processes is computer processes. Or even what Elon Musk is showing at the moment in regards to Tesla and electronic advancements. And as computer technology is advancing. So, you know, Tom Cruise is showing that avenue of the spy agency in his movies. Spying through time, through computer technologies, through encryption and through computer processes. NASA, they don't need that. They honestly don't need it. They use natural elements and chemicals and other advanced universal points in time out in deep space to pull time itself. They pull black matter itself. So I've seen a bunch of agencies as a child, as I'm saying, agencies that work with a natural chemical element like NASA, to the National Reconnaissance Office, to Five Eyes Spy Agency that works with mobile phones like we're using right now. So they're a spy agency that deal in communications and spying on communication technologies to look for threats, or someone using the internet saying, I'm going to blow up a building, or a police station or something like that, so, or extremists. So I've been through these integrated departments as a child, right up to seeing the end of the world. And it does start in the United States of America. And this was a threat analysis back in the 80s. You're actually watching through signals intelligence satellites in the National Reconnaissance Office, they actually watch real future media. Say Fox News in the year 2060. You're watching nightly news. You're watching nightly news in the year 2060 with the news reporter. The news reporter isn't even born yet. They know who it is.
Yeah.
They know their genetic makeup. They know their anatomy. They know what they'll be fed. They know where they'll be raised. They know who their mother and father is. They know where they'll work. They'll know how much chemicals they'll induce along their life. They'll know where they'll exercise, if they'll be an athlete. They know everything. These systems are advanced. But as you're saying, Chantel, it does give a point saying it is still moguls, basically, like all the cabal owning us. There's still formatting systems to say, well, obviously that has to be true to some sense. They are formatting systems to say, you're the chosen one. You're going to be a celebrity. You're free from the code.
This is insane, just to, getting out of that matrix, it's insane to think that, I say they because I don't know what else to call them, but that they've managed to wield all this power over us for all this time and still are in control of us, really, It's like that movie, The Hunger Games, isn't it? Where it's in that sort of controlled setting and people are watching, kind of pulling the strings. It's insane to think that this is going on. How do we break out of this, though? How does because it just seems so...
We can't. The only way possibly is to send me back to America, to send me back to Hollywood. Because I'm the system, remember? I am the system. I am the National Reconnaissance Office. I am the secret department of NASA. Whether I'm still in the airspace or not, my anatomy was still modified when I was a child at Area 51. I'm not professing to be someone. I'm not special. If anything, I've had to carry a horrible burden of time. Not only have people abused me to jump time, and this is why so many did it, Chantel, so many people jumped me because they were jumping time. You see, they wanted to steal portions of time from a military service I'm in. And in exchange for that, they become Sean Bean, but they don't really become someone who is saying that they are the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, is where I was as a child. Because as I said, I was still secretly, the modifications done to my skull as a child, all the way through the actual skull bone, is like a massive spider web. It comes across the brain like that. It's huge. And that is growing as a synthetic intelligence encryption code technology. And it's actually modified in the human skull. It's actually in your skull. Like imagine your skull bone. If you could grab a human skull and put your fingers in between the top and bottom, it would be probably about a good 5 millimeters underneath the human skull bone. And they modify and treat the human skull into this signals intelligence technology. And it's used for satellite. That's what I was used for as a child, signals intelligence by the National Reconnaissance Office. You can't hack it. You can't put an electronic implant in someone's ears, as these idiots think they can in Australia. They're always trying to steal CIA secrets from me in Australia because they know who I am. That's why they bring these bikie gangs here, like the Mongols, because they say, we'll steal the kid's secrets, put mind-reading technology in his head, and we will start up this bikie gang between California. Why is it always California? all the time. It's always California if it's another crime syndicate, because it's really Hollywood trading on insider trading. And they're selling secrets is what they're doing. Australia is up to something a bit more sinister. Talking about it online, I could probably get in trouble. But, Australia is involved in selling secrets to China, is what I'm saying, and the Chinese that live in Australia. And the Australian government has been doing that for a long time, which is espionage. A lot of this information, as I said, was shared out to general mainstream population around Australia. Australian Army, when I was a kid, didn't care. And that was that gay, what's known as the gay major, Pat O'Neill. He infiltrated the Australian Labor Party. He was based next door to my house while my mother was held hostage. And he is one of the most advanced Australian Army soldiers in using security intelligence. He is highly advanced and dangerous. I mean, dangerous. He has now been left the Australian Army and is now working in a consulting firm in Queensland, private industry. So Pat O'Neill is his name. He was running for Member of Parliament in Brisbane. And as I explained when I started this video, I told you about the technology in my ears now from Guantanamo Bay Naval Facility. They were the first soldiers in Australia to receive the technology direct from Vietnam War veterans, not from Australia. These were US Vietnam War veterans in few states across the United States of America: Texas, Nevada, California, Arizona. And they sent this miniature technology to Australia. Tiny, small devices used for mind reading and torture. They go in the middle ear and they're used for reading the mind, torturing the human faculties of the enemy if you capture them. So, that technology, as I said, was released to mainstream Australians, bikies, Hells Angels Australia, Hells Angels New Zealand, the Comancheros, all these different motorcycle clubs that started building in Australia, they're built on that technology, which came from Guantanamo Bay. This is the problem here. They know it's not necessary. You see what I'm saying? Why do they need electronic torture devices to put in someone's ears? That's not how you relay intelligence anyway. So you've got to understand what espionage is about. They're modifying real intelligence into a encryption hardware system. So they're trying to make out they're stealing information from the invisible, from the defense system, like Julian Assange, and they've found a way to reprogram it into an electronic mind reading implant. So they say, we own that information in the Hells Angels. We own that information on an electronic platform now, like Five Eyes spy agency, on an electronic encryption code platform. And we've stolen it from Adrien Wells. And Adrien Wells is from the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency in Hollywood. And they don't work with electronic encryption code in regards to intelligence. They work with, as I said, modifications done to the human brain and transmitting signals and satellite time, basically. The CIA are satellite time, which means to the CIA, when they activate some of those satellites, it's basically unlimited wealth. There's another way also to describe what they're trying to steal from me. When the CIA turn on their satellites, that's unlimited wealth immediately. There is no set amount. That's like turning on a banking corporation, like Rothschild's banking corporation. And when the CIA activate their systems, there is no money. Money is limitless. They just can continue creating encryption code and more numbers. There is just more money, as much money and drugs as you like, honestly. So you can see why I get attacked all the time, because people are trying to steal even a small bit of that encryption code of one small memory of me from Hollywood, from spy masters from Hollywood that I met as a child, and they're trying to steal it into the electronic platform.
Wow.
Because they can say then, and their corrupt banks in Australia that they're running through bikie gangs and their state government crime syndicate, we can build another $100 million high-rise tower just by invasive technologies in Adrien Wells' brain. So what they're doing to me is really serious crime. And as I'm saying, I do need to get my ass up and out of Australia, because if I don't sort of leave Australia and get back to Hollywood, I need to get a checkpoint is another way to describe it. I need to return myself back to a checkpoint because they've done too much organised crime on my head in Australia. Too much. way too much.
Yeah.
They've done so much that I need to get back to the US where I can find American citizens that won't talk to me, but they'll be CIA agents and they'll be able to put me through their national airspace. You see what I'm saying? Like a national military airspace. Also, facilities also called like NORAD in Canada, but also based in what's called Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado Springs. We're outside of there. They're underground facilities, but they're a military airspace, military security. And even if I turn up in Canada, it doesn't have to be US, but if I did turn up in California, that's still the Australian crime syndicate international trade they're doing all the time in the secret information they're making out they're stealing. Between Melbourne and Sydney in Australia, back to California, to San Diego, LA, or Hollywood directly, or San Francisco. So, like the system, I mean, I've seen it all. I know what they're doing, is what I'm saying. I can bring a whole government in because I've watched, you know what I mean? I was a child that was used in it. So, as I said, that's the reason this lady, Jacinda Kate Ardern, now the Prime Minister of New Zealand, was at my house as a child. She mocked me recently on my name must have been popping up, as I said, for the past 5 years. I've been sending messages to the CIA, just their messaging service. And that is only because I want to stimulate their intelligence. What I'm saying is people I grew up with in Australia are living in Hollywood now or England as celebrities, like Chris Hemsworth with Tom Hiddleston. They're making out that they know all about the insider intelligence system, the spy system. They're making out they stole all this information from me and they know all the secrets of the universe. You see, they're making out they've stolen everything. But really what's going on in Australia is that the Australians are really selling secrets of advanced cyber warfare and military technologies on an intelligence platform to the Chinese, to the CCP directly. So they're clearing out. The United States of America is selling off most of their secrets via Australia to China. Long term, that's going to not benefit the United States of America. It won't benefit the US Navy, US Air Force, or the United States Army. So what I'm saying, if I turned up in California, anywhere near Hollywood, San Francisco, LA, what would happen? Imagine the exposure to what the Australians have been doing, selling secrets to China. I'm still the head, remember? I'm still in secret, like their head to Hollywood, their head to how they got in to be celebrities. Hollywood's a lot older than me itself, its institution. But this was a dedicated time frame from the presidency of Ronald Reagan when he came to power onwards. So when Ronald Reagan entered his presidency onwards is the timeline I'm talking about. So if I turn back up in California, that's reinitiating that corruption from Ronald Reagan, what they did. The master plans, the espionage, the sabotage, the global sales of intelligence. So, for me, I'm not happy with what Australia is doing. That's all. I'm not happy with the way these Australians have treated me. I'm not going to bring you any good story. No one's treated me nice here. Raped me, punished me, tortured me to near death, poisoned me. Poured absolute any poison they could get their hands on. Used to pour it down my throat when I was a child. Another one involved with them, with the New Zealanders, with this Jacinda Ardern, when she came to my house as a child. He turned up much later. He was just 17 years old, but he was the closest head to the man in Australia who is the mastermind. He was the previous Governor-General of Australia. His name was Sir Peter Cosgrove. He's a Vietnam War veteran. He'd got a very decorated war history. But his right-hand man came down and poisoned me with cyanide when I was a little kid. I was about 10 years old. His name is Dr. Adam Cobb. He lives in Florida, and he's inside the US Defense Command. He's the one that's got access to do a lot of this terrorism. So he's been charged recently for pedophilia. They found pedophilia on his computers. These people are far worse. As I said, they're selling secrets to China since the 1980s. Yeah. Fifth, sixth generation United States Air Force technology, leaking it to the Chinese. Stealth military technology on naval ships, selling US naval secrets to the Chinese. So what I'm saying is, who's doing it? The Americans are leaking their own information from the deep state. The deep state themselves are purposely leaking their military information via Australian personnel, military personnel, direct to the Chinese through dirty black market avenues in banking, business, or Chinese connections. So what do they cover it up with? As I said, well, this comes up every time, Hollywood. This is their mask. This is their iron mask for what they're really doing. Long term, it will cause a war. So long term, as I said, what did I see at the end of the world around the year 2060? Mass global death and chemical weapons fallout, similar to COVID-19, but a chemical atmospheric weapon fallout. There was no oxygen. That was the news media of the year 2060 on American television when they were spying through the future. It's an atmospheric chemical fallout. So someone from space drops a highly advanced chemical bombs into the atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere. And it starves the Earth of oxygen. You cannot breathe. The system I was in as a child, as I said, there was a National Reconnaissance Office. So they deal in real threat analysis and integrated departments. So Jacinda Ardern recently, she's over in China sucking up the arse of the mini Chinese emperor. You know, I won't mock China because I still love China. I think China is still a beautiful country. Their culture is beautiful. Xi Jinping, when she was over there recently. So where does she get her prime minister status is what I'm saying. She got it from me as a child, secretly from the Australian Army, leaking Pentagon information. So as I'm saying, these people were enlisted and enlisted secretly. Each one rose to different positions. Django Fett, who is the Tamura Derek Morrison, now he's in so many movies. He's in so many movies. Once Were Warriors. He's so many famous movies from New Zealand. But the point is, getting involved in Star Wars means you're definitely involved in cyber intelligence, because Star Wars is that Monarch platform. It is another Monarch platform through film, through Lucasfilm. So that had to do, again, as I'm talking about, CIA and Hollywood, certain spies that lived in Hollywood, and what was known as the British Connection, which was made when I was first taken over to the United States of America. So that's how I met people like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. So I was flowing, dressed like a little girl. I was dressed up as a girl in America. They used to dress me up in a dress all the time, most of the states, moved me across in those private planes. So the reason for that, and that's held in cyber intelligence systems. I'm saying if you breach the brain using modern technologies like modern gangs, I'm talking about modern gangs, they can do mind reading quite easily. So in this modern era, now 2020, 2021, it's available. You could get inside Iggy Azalea's brain, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Joel that I talked about in Marvel. He's another one from Edithvale. You could put mind reading implants, hit them, put them in hospital in California, put a microchip in their brain, and you would find everything that I'm talking about. You'd find all the information. So, you know, it's not hidden. And they knew that because they were shared that by the Australian Army. That's what I'm saying. It's a platform. It's like entering heaven. You're all up in heaven together. You're all sharing the information together. That's what makes it an occult. And that's why the word occult is used. It's a secret. You're up in a platform that's a secret. And if you're enlisted to that secret, you can be a politician. You could be a prime minister. You can become a president. Or you could be Britney Spears. So, you know, it's still an overall, basically, an operation. So they're far from being celebrities. There's the problem. The long term, well, I already knew what they did to me as a child in Australia. But in regards to Star Wars, I'd already been through most of the cyber intelligence into the future movies, like episode 1, 2, and 3. They were already released in the early 1980s for the future, well after the year 2000. So this is what I'm saying. It might be a bit hard for most people to believe, but if you come and get into the clique with most Australians now, if you came from South Africa and started mixing with the people in the Westpac Bank, is what I'm saying, you got pretty high up inside the Westpac Bank, they would let you into their Insider Traders channel. In their Insider Traders channel, you'll go, whoa, what am I in? This is like a simulation world. I'm in another reality. Who operates this system? But the Westpac Bank is operating this through defence in Australia, military. And then you would find everything that I'm talking about. You would find everything. That now in the year 2021, they've probably got movies that they're watching as insider trading in Westpac Bank for the year 2040 from Hollywood.
Yeah.
They're in the system. They're inside the system. Now, that's not uncommon. It's not what I'm saying. It's not going to be rare anyway in a big movie industry, in a big movie machine like that, for them to be plotting and planning their portfolios of the future through the intelligence systems. Hollywood wants everything on time. There are money. What I'm saying, there's still a business. There's still a corporation. They've still got to make money, like Walt Disney or Warner or any other corporation, but they're not removed, as I'm saying. Even Hollywood itself is integrated with everyone else. Doesn't matter if it's Lucasfilm. Doesn't matter if it's another film producer. They're all integrated because it's an intelligence platform.
Yeah.
You just got to be a celebrity and you're in that intelligence platform. So.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Well, once again, Adrian.
Winston Peters, I'll just quickly talk about. He was the leader of the New Zealand First Party. I just wanted to quickly mention him, just in regards to the foundation of his movements in the year 1993. So he was the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand recently. Winston Raymond Peters is his name, and he came active in 1984. So he was at my house as a child from New Zealand. As I said, they turned up in a small bus with one vehicle, like a chauffeur vehicle. And he turned up with Jacinda Ardern, the now Prime Minister. They were at my house for army secrets and insider trading when I was a child. The army were purposely leaking security intelligence. They would come into my house to find out information on the Australian Labor Party because they were planning to sabotage and infiltrate that government attached to my dad's union, the painters and dockers, attached to the bank that he was managing, called the Waterside Workers Credit Union. And they were plotting to steal their bank, their credit union, and redirect funds to New Zealand and manage it as puppets, really? Manage it as puppets in the New Zealand government, playing their fake opposition. Jacinda Ardern would be the Australian Labor Party, but she's not. She's a New Zealand Prime Minister. Who she work for? She works for the Australian Army. So she's really from the Labor Party of Australia. You see, this is where even the same Russell Crowe. Again, Russell Crowe. Why is he Australian? Because that's where they source their information. Of course he wants to be Australian because that's where everyone got the information from. Anyway, I'll pull up now. I've said, quite a few names covered tonight. I've explained the Lord of the Rings and Sean Bean. So that's another big one from de Havilland Road there in Mordialloc. People can look that up. They can research the Satan Cinema, I'm pretty sure they were called. As a child, I remember their leather jackets when I was a kid. They used to come into my house. I only lived in the next street. I lived in number 4 Scarlett Street, across from Rabbit Airport. They were in the next road. So all walks of life is what I'm saying. The army chose people from all walks of life and sent them all over together. Some went to the Matrix. Some were real Asia agents, retired, and went into film in the Matrix. And some went to England. Some were bikies, and they went into certain film, all different avenues of film. So these people are hardened criminals. So some of them is what I'm saying. They're wanted for murder. What are they doing in England? So, anyway, I'm not too sure if you understand where I'm coming along here on this platform. I mean, heaven is the best way to describe that cyber intelligence.
Yeah. I get it.
Because it's a dwelling place, it's a dwelling place for the chosen people, for the chosen celebrities, for the chosen politicians, the chosen cabal, the chosen conglomerate, or
absolutely,
the chosen ones.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, again, we look at our time and it's run. Thank you so much. I look forward to having you back again for amazing information that is just from another, I can't say another world. It actually is from another world, right?
It is, because NASA's from another world. The technology NASA are using So,
yeah. Wonderful.
so anyway,
Adrian,
that's also an insight to COVID-19 not only being a first warning, but some of the media moving on up to the year 2060, it really was another threat analysis. It really is the end of the world around then. So, people do have to start following what the Democratic Party are willing to follow and get on with the Paris Accord, if that's what they wanted to call it. It's, as I'm saying, this was not even from Paris in regards to these emissions. This information was from NASA and the National Reconnaissance Office and other departments from America. Yet America is the biggest polluter in the world. Yet they moved all the information and hid it in France as a future calling, to control pollutions around the world, because they're not allowed to share their information. They're only a receiving agency. So this is why they hold and manipulate other governments to say, look, NASA's got a secret agency. We've got this much information on the future. We can hide the year 2060 in Paris, in France. And you've got to meet that pollution requirement by the year 2060. Otherwise, if you don't, the world's going to go through a chemical exchange. Is the threat analysis what I'm saying? They don't know if it's warfare in the future or a chemical pollution threat of the future, just through humankind expanding industrial too much, industry. But these threat analysis systems exist in these agencies. So either way, year 2060 on social media exists. People dying, billions of people dying. But they don't know in their threat analysis system in the CIA or NRO or even NASA, is it to do with human self-destruction or Russia or China secretly dropping chemical fallout somewhere on the earth, modifying the human atmosphere? But deeper in other departments, the deep state, they would know, what the threat is about. So
yeah, absolutely. Wow. Gosh, thank you so much. Janie, thank you so much. Would you like to say anything before we bid each other farewell today?
You make it hard, Adrian. How can I beat that? No, only joking. I would like to ask Adrian quickly, when do you feel or think that you might go to America?
It's all based on finances now. I mean, I've had 10 years of gang stalking now in Australia by the government, direct by the government. So, and that's, as I know, they're a gang. So they've drawn my finances down quite a lot. I mean, I've lost a lot of money. I've been through 5, 6 motor vehicles. They've damaged every property I've moved into. I've moved into properties, bought white goods, lost things. So, getting the funds together to do that. I mean, other people on Facebook have said, maybe you can start a GoFundMe and we can try and get you to Canada or the US. So, it's only testing the water, as I'm saying. Going there could only be testing the water, and it's going to happen invisibly anyway. I'm not going to change the world. You're not going to see, if I travel to the United States of America, it's not going to happen physically by me arriving there. It's going to happen invisibly through the shadows of time, through NASA and other departments that deal invisibly.
I was going to say that the Satan sinners were where you said, because when I lived in Chelsea, a couple of these bikie gangs were all around there, and I remember them burning down a woman's house that lived on the other side, because there were these 2 lesbians that lived there and they didn't like them, so they burnt down the house while they were going shopping. So it was pretty bloody crazy times, in around this area where we were. And so a lot of people, have a hard time believing this shit. And I say, oh, good on you for not, because you didn't have to fucking grow up in it. But exactly. Some of us did. So, whatever is. And I have respect for Adrian of sharing his story. And another thing he said about the future and then being able to see things, that brought to mind of, hey, that means that they know certain things about certain people, and that would make me see clear of why some kids are attacked from a young age. Why they're attacked, let's say, by many different things from a young age to try and get them in, because they can see who certain people are or supposed to be or whatever, and that's why they're kind of stalked.
Behind it.
Yeah. And so that makes sense. And I know some people go, oh, we don't know about this stuff and it sounds a bit crazy. And I'm like, well, 50 years ago, you wouldn't have thought mobile phones were possible. So, you know, society has made us think on a lower platform and, you know, not use our IQ like we could use it. So make us think that there isn't inventions that there already has been for many years. So
exactly.
That's
well, as I said, most of this is still it's still a secret department of NASA overall, the information. It's just a way of NASA finding a way long-term to privatise space. And they've done that long-term. They've done that. SpaceX, Sir Richard Branson, all these people that I was taken through to meet as a child. And you'll always find they've been knighted. They've always, you know, they've always been knighted. There's always that title, Sir, there. So the same with the Danish royal family. I was taken there in 1983. As I said on my last video, when I was brought back to Australia, I was taken to meet her father, who was going to work on the secret NASA space code. This was an intelligence I was carrying back to Australia through departments of cyber. And he was going to work on like secret mathematics on cracking the code for deep space and other space codes. So, you know, and that information was shared. His daughter is now Princess Mary of Denmark. She's married to the Danish royal family. So, you know, in this system of NASA, it has been exploited at all different levels. It has been, you know, shared around the world. You know, and that's, you know, other stories like Thomas Markle and Meghan Markle. That whole instance now with Prince Harry is Prince Harry has actually married, in a sense, my MI6 case file of how I was moved as a child, because they don't ever remove this information. It's not like a crime where you don't have a witness. When you're in these military platforms or a spy agency, you've got a witness 24/7. You know, these crimes or even your movements can't be hidden. Everything is stored in mass data centers. They know where you were. You know, it's not a normal department. It's not like police or even the FBI. You know, these are departments like the National Reconnaissance Office or another department of NASA or the CIA. They can say, we know exactly where Adrien Wells was on this day. You know, in the month of January 1983, he was there visiting the Danish royal family. Then he was taken up to Finland and Sweden and across to Norway. And then he was flown there by the army officer. And then he was flown over to Israel, to the Israeli Air Force. And he was moved back over to Ukraine before David Hurley started his movements to go into Russia. And that's how I met as a child Vladimir Putin. He's the current president of Russia. He's inside this NASA agency, a secret agency that was used for government, private government evolution, I guess you could call it, a way of moving government, the US government, into the private space sector is what it was about when I was a child. So it involved a lot of agencies. Because you have to bribe governments, remember? You've got to bribe governments into like a new world order all around the world to get involved in this.
Yeah.
So...
guys, I have to go. I'm sorry, I'm running late for another appointment. I've got someone calling me on the line here all the time. So thank you so much again. Adrian, we'll catch up with you in the next couple of days again. And I send you much love. Thank you so much to our viewers for watching another amazing, incredible episode of what Adrien Wells has to tell us about his life. So I look forward to seeing you again. In the meantime, I send you much love. Take good care of yourselves. Give us a like, a share, and a subscribe if you haven't already, please. Catch us on Facebook, BitChute, Twitter, and where else? Telegram. That's right. Take it easy, everyone. Send you much love.
Have a wonderful day. Happy Friday 13.
Thank you.
Yeah.
God bless you.